G'day, welcome back to the channel. Now this video is about a consultation paper, the British CAA UK paper that they've presented. It's CAP 2610, and it's a paper designed to solicit feedback on some regulatory changes that are planned in the UK. Now if you're in other countries, don't switch off. This does affect you, and you'll see why as we go through this. This is something that will affect the entire world, even though it's aimed at British drone operators, model aircraft operators. The effects of one regulator have a ripple effect through the whole global aerospace regulatory framework, and we'll see that as we look at this paper. Now, what's the purpose of this paper? Well, in theory, this paper is designed to present people with objective, verified facts that they can then use to determine whether the proposed changes are good or bad, and then submit their comments accordingly. However, I think in this case, it's not really what's happening now. I've tried to make this video several times, and it always ends up in a rant. I become a rant over the whole thing because I've got to say, let me be charitable. CAA UK, this is not your best work. This is, to be honest, appalling. Let me say right from the get-go, I think CAA should withdraw this document. Go back, do it again, and then represent it, because it fails the test of objectivity. It fails the test of presenting evidenced facts. It is a document that is full of hyperbole. It's full of misinformation. It misrepresents things. In a word, it is incredibly disingenuous. It is a poor piece of work. And I'm going to explain as we go through this why I believe that to be so. Now, the first thing that I noticed is that just like every other regulator, the CAA tells us that, and this is on the last paragraph of the foreword, it says, the feedback provided to this consultation will help the CAA to develop policy recommendations that help create a world-leading regulatory environment for UAS. Now, the interesting thing is every regulator in the world is claiming to be producing world-leading regulation. They can't all be leading. There's not enough room for everybody to be leading. Who's going to follow? And in fact, as we go through this document, you'll see that this is not world leading. This is basically the FAA's NPRM for remote ID on steroids. They've taken almost everything that the FAA proposed when they released their remote ID NPRM, and they've just republished it. There's FRIAs in here, there is network remote ID, there's broadcast remote ID. It's basically the same document with an English accent. And it's like, how's that world leading? It's not. So right from the get-go, right from the foreword, they're not being totally honest with us, are they? But I'm going to walk through here. Now, as I say, I don't want this to turn to a rant, so I'm going to try and be charitable all the way through. And first of all, I want to look at some of the facts and figures and the way these facts and figures are presented. Now, as I said, this should be an objective document laden with facts and evidence that we can verify, and that points to the benefits or whatever of remote ID. There are other aspects of this document, but I want to focus mainly on remote ID because that's the critical one. So let's take a look a bit further through the document and let's see how they present this data. Now, the executive summary, which starts on page 5, is basically an overview of the document. Everything else, or everything in the executive summary is expanded on elsewhere in the document. But I want to look at the weasel words. I'll use weasel words. Let me read the first paragraph. Unmanned aircraft systems are forming an increasingly significant part of society, delivering transformational benefits to businesses and providing services that improve lives. That's not happening so much yet, is it? This is something that's going to happen perhaps in the future. I mean, if you're at the CAA, a member of the CAA watching this video, I hope you are, go to the nearest window in your little glass building, look out. How many drones do you see? Do you see any drones? I don't think you see any drones. These promised benefits are yet to realise. Yeah, there are delivery trials being run in certain parts of the world, but for example, Google has done over 100,000 drone deliveries in Australia, but it hasn't earned one red cent because it's all trials. There's no commercial viability to drone delivery. It may come in the future, but it's a long way off. So these alleged transformational benefits do not exist yet, except perhaps if you're in surveying or inspecting bridges and wind turbines. Yeah, there's some benefits there, but these are very niche markets. The average business is seeing zero benefits from drones, but it's being claimed that that's what's happening. So disingenuous. Anyway, I'll move on. It says external analysis estimates that the UAS sector could contribute up to 45 billion to the UK economy by 2030. Let's examine. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Oh, we could get up to $45 billion to the UK economy by 2030. But let's look at the words. Let's look at what's actually said in the sentence. The key word is could. Do you know what could means? Could means a possibility, not a probability, not a certainty, a possibility, a less than even chance. So what they're saying is there's a less than even chance that the UAS sector could contribute up to 45 billion. Not 45 billion, but somewhere between 0 and 45 billion. So there's a less than even chance that the sector could contribute somewhere between 0 and 45 billion. That's not quite as rosy as the headline impression that that sentence makes, is it? When you get right down to the nitty-gritty, they're saying maybe there'll be a benefit. Now, I would expect a document like this that's going to throw figures around to have some concrete facts, not some maybe, some ifs, some possibilities, less than 50% chance. This is starting to sound like a spin document, a bit of hyperbole. They want you to believe something that they can't actually verify with solid, hard evidence. So they're going to make stuff up. They're going to phrase it with coulds and possibilities. So it's not necessarily untrue, but it's far from the truth, I think. And that's the theme of this document all the way through. And that's deeply concerning to me because people are going to be making decisions on the basis of what they read here. And if you don't read between the lines, you're maybe not going to make the right decision. It goes on to say other things later on, which I might cover, but I want to keep this video as short as I can. Anyway, then of course, one of the reasons for remote ID is to reduce risk. There's obviously got to be some kind of risk that we're going to mitigate with new regulations and new systems such as remote ID. So I go to the second paragraph here, and it says, however, increased adoption of UAS may lead, again, may, not will, not probably will, may, there's a possibility, may lead to to increase in safety and security risks. So they're not saying there will be, they're saying there's a possibility. These risks could, again, the word could. In fact, I looked up, I did a search on here. This is a 42-page document. The word could is there 32 times. 32 times they've made this less than even chance. But they're using it, promoting it. It's all, like this could, but it means there's a less than even chance it will. And that's not really very hard evidence. It says these risks could be caused by UAS flying dangerously close to people, buildings, objects, or aircraft transporting illegal substances or capturing sensitive personal data without consent, amongst others. Now, all of those things sound like terrible things, don't they? Transporting illegal substances, my goodness, flying too close to aircraft and buildings, and it's making it sound like this could be major dangers, major risks. But my question is, how many times have these perceived risks turned into an actual incident where property has been damaged, people have been injured or worse? And the answer is very, very few. No one's died. The number of injuries is very, very small. And the amount of property damage is, I don't think I've seen any property damage. So they then try and back up these suggestions, these possibilities with some numbers. And again, disingenuous. Let's look at these numbers they give us. They say, there is clear evidence that some of these risks have already materialised. Between November 2020 and October 2023, police received 18,290 reports of drone flights involving illegal, nuisance, criminal or safety concern. That sounds terrible, my goodness. Nearly 20,000 bad things have happened in a 3-year period. My goodness, we need to take action. But let's look a bit closer. These are reports of drone flights. But where are the prosecutions? Where is the follow-up? How many of these reports were something illegal drone activity? For example, if someone had their drone stolen, that's illegal. It's an illegal action involving a drone, but the drone got stolen. It's not, the drone wasn't endangering anybody. It wasn't causing risk to anybody, but it is, going by these words, it is an illegal action involving a drone and reported to police. So these figures do not properly categorize those incidents. How many of those incidents actually involved danger to people or property? They don't tell us because I don't think those numbers actually fit the narrative they're trying to spin here. For example, I would rather know how many of those reports actually involved prosecutions. How many people were found to be doing bad things as a result of these reports? How many people were investigated and prosecuted That would be a much smaller number, but that small number doesn't fit with this fear, this uncertainty, this perception they're trying to create that we're on the cusp of a catastrophe and we must regulate with remote ID to prevent it. So you can see this is weasel words again. The headline looks great. If you gloss over it, look, ooh, this is really... But when you look closely, it's what they're not telling us that is really important. They're leaving out the critical details, such as how many of those drone incidents were, I found a drone, I had a drone stolen, I saw a drone and I called the police to see if it was legal. None of those things actually endanger life or property, but they are a drone incident involving potentially an illegal activity. So we need to get those figures. Why are they not included? There's a number of occasions in this document where good, solid information could be presented. It's available, but they've chosen not to present it. One can only wonder why they have left that really critical information out. And I believe it's because it doesn't suit the picture they're trying to paint here. Now, if we go into context on page 7, section 1.2 is, again, one of these weaselly word things where they say, over coming years, we expect, so there's no guarantees, it's just an expectation, we expect the UAS sector to grow as even more individuals and businesses harness their benefits. This will support our economy to grow and create new jobs benefiting us all. External analysis predicts that drones could save businesses up to $22 billion a year. Keyword, could. Keyword, up to. So there's no guarantees. There's a less than even probability that somewhere between $0 and $22 billion a year could be saved by using drones. No guarantees. This is not hard data. This is plucking stuff out of your bureaucratic backside and pasting it up here so it looks good. Not adequate. When you know, that's not satisfactory when you are trying to provide people with an objective view of a problem so that they can make reasonable, rational submissions on the basis of whether this is good or bad. You're hyperinflating the risk and hyperinflating the benefits of regulation. Anyway, it says, and contribute up to, there's that up to 45 billion a year, 45 billion again to the UK economy by 2030. And then just to put icing on the cake, UAS could enable up to 270,000 jobs. No guarantees, probably won't, but it could. And this is not, there's no place for this in a document like this. We need the facts, we need the evidence, we need irrefutable evidence with citations to show this is how we got that evidence, this is where the evidence came from, not stuff that you've plucked out of your backside on maybe this will happen. And it sounds good, so let's put it in the document. I'm sorry. As I say, this turned into a rant so many times, this video. In section 1.3 also, again, they're trying to hype up the fear aspect. Oh, this is so dangerous. It says, however, the widespread availability of UAS has already created safety and security risks that can, not necessarily will, but can have widespread ramifications. Some of these risks have been widely publicised. Thank you, media, for vilifying drones, such as UAS flying near airport runways or in other flight restriction zones. And yes, we get reports of that. And surprisingly, not a lot of reports of that, because many of those sightings turn out to be balloons or nothing at all. So yeah, again, they're not giving us hard evidence here. Where are the numbers? I want some numbers. Other risks posed by UAS are less well publicised, but observed today by the CAA, government and police. These include UAS used for reconnaissance of targets for criminality, transporting illegal substances into restricted sites, capturing images of sensitive sites, i.e. live crime scenes, traffic accidents, schools, national security sites, enabling stalking and harassment, and flying dangerously, i.e. directly above traffic or near emergency service helicopters. Now, all of these things happen. They do. But it's the magnitude of the problem that we should be looking at. I mean, there are many, many things out there that happen that are bad, but we don't get too concerned because they don't happen often enough to warrant regulation or policing or anything. You know, we need some context here, some scale, some proportionality. Then there's no numbers. Where are the numbers? They must have these numbers because they're telling us it happens. Someone's counting them, but they haven't included them. Now they do go on to give numbers in the next paragraph, where it says data provided by the police and number demonstrate that these risks have already materialised and are growing. And again, here's this 18,290 reports of drone flights involving legal, nuisance, criminal or safety concern. But there's no categorisation. There's no categorisation. I mean, someone reports a drone flight. I saw a drone. It's not a threat. It's not a risk. It's not a problem. But it's included in the 18,290. And we don't know how to carve that out. And if it was worth carving out, if most of those reports were actual real incidents that endangered people or property, they would have included that number, but they didn't because it doesn't fit the narrative. And they go on to say, in the 6 weeks following the 23rd of September 2023, the CAA received 558 reports of UAS operating within a flight restriction zone or outside an FRZ, but over 400 feet. Okay, but were they really drones? We don't know, because so many people claim to have seen a drone. It turns out to be something else. We don't know. And then it says, between January and October 2023, 9 UAS have been reported operating between 6,000 and 13,000 feet. Now, this is an area where pilots are going to be reporting, right? We expect these, because they're the only people up there. Pilots report seeing a drone. And the problem is that just because you have epaulets on your shoulder doesn't mean you're infallible. And this has been proven so many times. Heathrow, a pilot reported that he'd hit a drone on landing his passenger jet at Heathrow Airport. There was all headlines everywhere, airliner hits drone on landing at Heathrow. Pilot, you've got to respect, he must have been right. No, it turns out it was a shopping bag, but it was reported as a drone sighting. Now, if we look back a little bit in time, we go back to the 1960s, 1970s, pilots of airliners regularly reported seeing UFOs in the skies. It was an everyday occurrence. You'd see headlines, pilots see UFO, and people go, oh, there's UFOs, aliens. We don't see that anymore, do we? Well, what's happened? Have all the aliens stopped flying UFOs now? They're flying drones because every unidentified sighting now is a drone. I don't believe that aliens are only flying drones. And if you think about it, if you look at all the sightings today, surely some of those must be UFOs. And what has happened that has made all those UFO sightings turn into drone sightings? Well, it's perception, isn't it? I recall receiving correspondence that indicated that the British Airline Pilots Association, BALPA, advised its members to report all unidentified sightings as drones. That was a diktat sent out to the pilots. So when they see something, we don't know what it is, put it down as a drone sighting. So how many of these sightings of drones operating between 6,000 and 13,000 feet are something other than a drone? UFO? Shopping bag? Weather balloon? We don't know. We don't know because we can't trust this data. It's not reliable data. And that's been proven time and time again. At Gatwick, recently, the airport was closed for a while. Pilots sighted drones near a runway. Turned out to be party balloons from an event that was just in a few fields over. But it was reported as a drone sighting. It was party balloons. So how many of these, how many reports? 9 UAS, how many of those were actually drones? And and also important, what was the outcome? How much property damage was there? How many people were injured? How many people died? None. So even if you see a drone, it doesn't mean someone's going to die. It doesn't mean something's going to get broken. It's a very big sky. There's a lot of room for a lot of things. Now, people should not be flying drones near airports or anything like that. But one has to wonder, will remote ID stop that? No, remote ID is not an active way of stopping drones from doing bad things. It's a passive thing. It reports that that's happened. It might help you find the people that did it, but it's not going to stop anybody from doing a bad thing. And here is the ultimate indication that this document is a piece of propaganda. It is not objective. It does not contain the necessary facts. It contains illusions. It contains hyperbole. Because if we read section 1.5 on page 8, it says the impacts of these risks go just beyond just safety and security. They also require significant public resources to manage, cause disruption to lives and businesses, and compromise the viability of the commercial UAS sector. The closure of Gatwick Airport in 2018 was estimated to cost police £459,000, the airport between 1.4 million and 15 million, and the airlines over 35 million. And today, 5 years later, there is still not one shred of evidence to prove there was ever a drone at Gatwick in 2018. But they're using this, they're citing this as evidence. It's not evidence. It's been widely dispelled that there was ever a drone at Gatwick, but they're going to use that because it's headlines. And it gives the perception that if we don't implement this draconian remote ID stuff, then there's going to be more of this happening and more cost to the airlines and the people and everything. When you have to bring in myth, the myth of the Gatwick drone, when you have to present myth as fact, you have no facts. You're admitting we've got nothing, so we're just going to regurgitate some headlines from 5 years ago which have been roundly debunked and use that to convince you, the person reading this paper, to support our objective to introduce remote ID. That's unacceptable. As I say, CAA, be ashamed. Take this document back, rewrite it, include some hard facts, some evidence, the numbers we want, not the numbers you'd rather give us, but the numbers we need to make an objective assessment of the risk. Because your job here is to identify and quantify risk so that we can see whether your proposals to manage that risk, remote ID, is proportionate to that risk. And you claim to be proportionate elsewhere in this document, but you are proportionate to the perceived risk that you have, the picture you've painted, not the actual risk. You haven't convinced me that the risk is anything like that you are painting. That's unreasonable. So I've gone straight on to the chapter on remote ID, which is on page 22. And this is where, again, as I say, you have to respond to this document. You have to have a say, because if you don't have a say, you can't complain when they do things you didn't want them to do. But do not for 1 minute believe that what you say will have any effect. And if you want proof of that, it's in this very document. Well, look at section 5.2. It says 60.7% of responses to the call for input. This is a previous consultation. 60.7%, which is the vast majority, it's quite a significant majority of responses to the call for input were negative. This is regarding remote ID. So over 60% of the people said no, remote ID is not a good thing. That's the majority. Just 15.3% of responses were positive. So you've got a 4-to-1 ratio. 4 times as many people said no to remote ID as said yes to it. So they've had that feedback. So you would think if they were listening to consultation, they'd say, well, there's an overwhelming lack of support for remote ID. Maybe we shouldn't do that. But no, despite the fact there's a 4-to-1 feedback against remote ID, we have this consultation paper which says, this is remote ID, how should we implement it? So they didn't listen, did they? They've acknowledged, they consulted, they've acknowledged, but they did not listen. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this very consultation we see now. So if you think that anything you say in response to this document is going to have any effect, you are sorely deluded, because they've just proven they consult, but they do not listen. And that is the flaw in this whole process. By law, when making new regulation, you must consult with those affected. But there is nothing in law that says you have to listen or act on the results of that consultation. It's an exercise in ticking boxes. This is what bureaucrats are so good at. They create work and they look like how busy we are. Look at all the stuff we've done. Look at all the results we've got. Look at all the consultation responses. And then they just file them in a little bucket in the corner to be taken out and shredded. That's what happens. I'm sorry, but it is so true. Unless they get an overwhelming support for what they want to do, then they will cite all these positive responses. And in fact, it's interesting because there's a 4-to-1 ratio of against to for. But then they go on basically to say, they give 2 sentences, one supporting, one mentioning the positives and one mentioning the negatives. They say here, respondents raise concerns about data privacy implications and remote ID effectiveness in delivering improved security. Then respondents with positive views recognise the benefits from identifying unlawful operators. So it's a 4-to-1 against, but it's even Stevens in terms of how they represent those views. So they're biasing towards the positive. Anyway. If we go into section 5.4, it says the CAA, Home Office, Department for Transport and Police maintain the view that the security benefits of remote ID will be important in preventing unlawful UAS operations and enabling UAS regulations to be enforced. Now, let me tell you right now, remote ID will stop nothing. Having a registration plate on your car doesn't stop people from speeding. They don't stop people from driving dangerously. These things are passive. They are after the fact. They'll help you perhaps track down the people who do those things, but they will not stop someone from speeding. Putting a registration plate on your car doesn't suddenly limit its speed to the maximum defined by law, does it? No. These are not ways of preventing anything. Absolutely. If anyone believes that this will prevent bad things from happening, they are dreaming, living in a dream world. Anyway, it says, specifically, remote ID will support the police and other relevant authorities to identify malicious UAS operators and take appropriate action. Well, will it? Will it? And we're talking, it says malicious, not negligent, malicious. Now, if malicious means with intent, someone goes out there with an intention to do something bad, they are not going to use a drone with remote ID, or if they do, it's not going to be their drone. When someone decides they're going to rob the local branch of Barclays or whatever, they steal a car and they drive down in the stolen car with, it's got a remote ID, it's a number plate on it, but it might be your number plate. It might have stolen your car. They'll drive down there, they'll rob the bank, they'll drive off, dump the car. So that number plate, that remote ID, is in no way any help in identifying who robbed the bank. If they're deliberately, maliciously setting out to do something bad, they will not use a drone with remote ID that can be tracked back to them. So this is a complete lie. This is absolute fallacy. It's like saying registration of vehicles will enable us to catch bank robbers because we'll know who they are by the numbers on the registration plate on their car. That's rubbish. So again, it paints a great picture, but there's no basis in fact here. Now, negligent, yeah, someone buys a drone down at the local, department store, goes and flies it at an airport. Yeah, that may help you track them down. But even then, are they going to register that drone? If they're that stupid that they're going to fly at an airport, will they even bother registering it? We don't know. So even in the case of negligent, it may not be as much of a help as people think. The second point here is, it will enable the police to differentiate between malicious and negligent UAS operations and focus resources on those that pose the greatest threat. You won't know. You will not know. If you see a drone flying with remote ID and you check it out, oh yeah, it's Bill Smith down the road, you don't know if it's been stolen in the last hour and it's about to do something nefarious. You can't differentiate on that basis, can you? And if there's a drone without remote ID, you might not even know it's there. So again, it serves far less value than you might think. It sounds great on paper, but in reality, remote ID is not a panacea for these things. It's not even much of a help, to be totally honest. And then it says, the final aspect is to promote increased compliance by increasing accountability from UAS users. Well, let's stop and think for a moment. Wasn't that what registration was supposed to do? When they rolled out registration, they said, this will hold drone operators accountable and therefore everyone will be happy and safe. Did that not work? If it didn't work, then either we were lied to about the effects of registration, or when they rolled out registration, they really had no idea. They'd hoped that would happen, but it never happened, so they're incompetent. Whether you're dishonest or incompetent, neither of those is acceptable. And as we've seen in this document, there's more dishonesty and more incompetence being thrown at us. We're expected to endorse this by saying, yes, go ahead with remote ID. No. I think that the civil aviation has to come to a much higher standard before they get endorsement from the people who are going to be so significantly disadvantaged by this system and have to incur such a huge amount of cost, because there is a huge amount of cost associated here with the implementation of remote ID. Someone's got to pay for it. It's going to be you. Now, in section 5.5 on page 23, they say our view is that remote ID is a proportionate intervention due to the scale of security risks presented by UAS misuse and the low impact of remote ID to operators who fly UAS safely and securely. Now, they haven't quantified the scale of security risk. They've given us some airy-fairy numbers they've plucked out of their backside and said could and may and painted a picture of this might happen. But that's not how you quantify security risk. We want to know the probability and the severity. Multiply those together, you get the risk. You have not done this. You have not presented a case to say there is a risk. And you haven't quantified that risk to the degree that we can determine whether this response is proportionate. So don't lie. It's your view, but you have presented no evidence to back that up in this document. So we can't agree with that. It then goes on to say, remote ID is an established technical solution implemented by several international governments and national aviation authorities, including the EU, USA, Switzerland and Japan, demonstrating the important role remote ID has in protecting airspace globally. Now, this is very interesting. Remember I said it's more important what they leave out than what they put in? These other countries have implemented remote ID. So if it was effective in the way that was claimed just a moment ago by those three things that was going to make all these benefits, where is the figures? Why does this document from the CAA not cite the results that have been achieved in those countries, saying, this has been reduced by this amount, we've had this many fewer drone sightings, this many fewer drugs dropped into prisons, this much less harassment and stalking? Why are those figures not there? Surely if it is, as they claim, an international success, why are they not citing the hard concrete evidence to prove that? Could it be because there is no evidence to prove that? Could it be that, yes, these countries have implemented remote ID, but they have not seen the benefits promised? Therefore, we best not talk about that. Just say they've done it and it's a success. Don't actually put any hard evidence in here, because it would actually paint the wrong picture. Those are the things that worry me about this document. As I say, disingenuous at most. And it just leaves out too much information that we know is available. And when you wonder, why have they left that out? If it's going to prove their case, why would they leave it out? Because it doesn't prove the case. It proves the exact opposite. We should be challenging CAA on this and saying, CAA, you have just not proven your case. There is no proof of need for remote ID. There's no proof that there will be any quantifiable, tangible benefits. If there was benefits, you'd have been citing all the results from these other countries, but you're not. So, yeah, you can see why I've said this document should be withdrawn, and they should take it away and fill it with real facts, verifiable data, evidence, not Gatwick in 2018 and other myths and legends, and not possibilities of maybe up to $45 billion benefit to the economy, £45 billion benefit to the economy, maybe up to 270,000 jobs. No, that's just rubbish. So this is part one of the video. I don't want to make it too long. I'm going to look at some of the other things, how they plan to implement remote ID, why it's going to cost people so much money if they do go ahead and do this, why it is going to continue to kill the hobby because if you haven't read the document, everything, no matter how large or small, even the smallest child's toy, will require that child to sit a test before they can legally fly it. How are you going to get a 5-year-old to sit a test, a written test, before they can fly their little toy drone they got for Christmas? Their little, and if you've got a camera on your drone, then forget sub 250. Everything has to have network remote ID, and it will control when you can fly. You will not be able to arm without getting permission from the network. It is draconian. It is like the FAA's NPRM on steroids. I'll go over that in the next video if you want. So go down to the comments now, say yes please next part, or say no, don't bother. We've heard enough, because I don't want to bore you. But as you can see, this document is hardly worth discussing because it is a work of fiction. It is a piece of hyperbole. It is something that I would expect a PR department to write, to try and spin a case for something that had no substance. And that's what they're doing here, filling it with rubbish. So there you go. Tell me what you think. Do you agree with me? Disagree with me? Get into the comments. And I mentioned this is important because we can see this came from America. This is the USA FAA's NPRM just regurgitated and tweaked somewhat. So even if you're in Australia, Canada, or anywhere else in the world, this is coming to you. So it's very important we all pay attention here, and we all work to make sure that this doesn't happen, because otherwise then Australia will look at it and go, well, that worked well in the UK, let's do that. And Canada will say, oh, that worked well in Australia, let's do that. So it's a chain thing. They're all leading at the same time, and they all want to do one better than the other by taking the worst, most draconian pieces of regulation and making them worse, and then saying, we're the best. We've got to stop that. Anyway, there you go. Thank you. Sorry the video was longer than I wanted it to be, but the next one will probably be longer. No, it won't be shorter. And in the meantime, thank you. Nearly Christmas. Merry Christmas to you and yours. I will get some more videos out before, will I? It's Christmas Eve day here at the moment. What's the time? 6:30 in the morning. So I hopefully have another video out before Christmas. If not, Merry Christmas to you and yours. And thanks to all the people who support me in my endeavours to show the crap that's going on with regulation around the world. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye for now.
Overregulation is like a tumor. It's killing our hobby. It must be terminated. Now!